Welcome to Markets Today. It's the beginning of another week. This week begins with the suspension of Kenya Airways from the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Kenya Airways was last week on Friday suspended from trading on the Nairobi Securities Exchange. This is a culmination of a couple of events that have been happening in the aviation sector. For one, this is a stock that gained 30% in the last quarter alone, driven by speculation. A stock that hit a low of almost 80 cents per share and saw a lot of speculative activity with investors coming in to buy at the low with the hope of a government bailout at the time. What has happened is now the company has been suspended from trading for the next 3 months on the NSE. A couple of things are also happening. On June 15th, that is last month, middle of last month, we did see a bill coming to Parliament, and that's the National Aviation Management Bill. And it has a couple of proposals just to see how it can be able to revive the aviation sector. If this bill is passed, that is, it goes through the first, second, and third reading and finally through the presidential assent, it will see Kenya Airways no longer being a privately listed company, or rather a publicly listed company, and it will revert to being an entirely fully owned state entity. This will actually see the government of Kenya inject capital into a newer entity. Today, what is listed is Kenya Airways PLC. If this bill goes through, you'll no longer have Kenya Airways PLC, but instead you will have Kenya Airways as a newly registered company that will have a capital injection to be able to oversee its operations. Over and above that, you'll also have a new entity called the Kenya Aviation Corporation that will be incorporated, and it will have 4 operating entities. Kenya Airways will be under this. In other words, Kenya Airways will no longer be a standalone. It will be a state entity under an umbrella body. It will have a managing director that will be reporting to the chief executive officer of this umbrella entity. The key operations for Kenya Airways will be essentially remain as is, which is providing cargo and cargo and passenger traffic facilities inbound and outbound of Kenya. This continues to be a strategic asset. Now we want to understand what has brought us here, what do we need to look out for in the future, and what does it mean for the way forward in the aviation industry. In studio, we are joined by Mr. Abraham Kamau. He is the CEO of Miradi Capital. Welcome to the show, Abraham. A lot is happening on Kenya Airways.
Yes, it is.
What are your thoughts? Give us your overview of what's happening.
I think we are looking, first of all, Kenya Airways was already having its problems for about 2-3 years, and COVID just came to accelerate that process. We are now looking at a situation where all the aeroplanes are grounded. They are now trying to lay off staff. So it's not a very good picture. And we're in a situation where something has to be done. In the past, we've tried to throw in money into KQ with little results. And I think that's why now we've gone this direction, where we want to literally re-nationalize, because KQ was a national asset before. It was. So that's why we're talking about re-nationalization. Now, what that will do is that, yes, it will shift ownership from private to government. It will be wholly owned under the big umbrella. But more importantly, and I think that realization has come, is that we are now want to look at KQ differently, in that we just don't want to look at it for the value that it portends to its shareholders, but rather for the value that it portends for the whole country.
Is there value for the country?
There is a lot of value, because it really just it sits around how you look at it.
Okay.
Because if you look KQ as a purely financial asset, then basically what you're saying is that KQ is not worth much, because actually its capital is negative. So literally it means it has no value from a book perspective. So for the shareholders, that's why you see it went to 80 cents and it was sliding. So purely as a financial asset, there was really no value in KQ. But however, if you look at KQ as an economic asset, then the value is immense. What do I mean? KQ is what drives is what drives our economy in very many ways. Number one, tourism. With our model, it brings our tourists home. It moves us around in the country, and then, and more importantly, we're able to have the whole of Africa in. But what was challenging was what was our model. Is it an inward bound model? Is it an outward bound model?
Okay.
So that was in contention. Number two, our choice of destinations. What was driving it? But now if we shift it purely as an economic asset, which is what we are going to do if this bill goes through, which I believe it will, then it will start driving economic agenda. And in the process, we'll still make money for the now we'll have one shareholder.
the shareholder it's all about the public.
Yeah. So that shareholder will be the government. This shareholder now will achieve two objectives. They'll drive the economic agenda, and over time, they'll get a financial return. But what is overriding now is the economic agenda, which is one, to make sure that we fortify our tourism model around certainty of who we can bring in and how we bring them in, and how we move them around in Kenya through KQ and the Jumbo Jet. Then we move the issue of our industry, our agriculture, our cargo capacity in KQ needs to be better than it is now. Because had it been good, KQ would not be struggling the way they're struggling, or putting merchandise in passenger planes. You see, we're just trying to fumble around. Because we need to shift to take our produce into our markets.
Yes.
So that's the choice of our list.
Do we have produce? You know.
Yes, agricultural produce we are good.
You know why I asked that?
Yes.
I was going through my models overnight.
Yes.
I covered Kenya Airways when they did the rights issue in 2011.
Yes.
And they had this magnanimous story of we want to enhance cargo traffic and passenger traffic. But then there was always the question of, are you taking capital and allocating it to fund liabilities, and you're buying first-class cars for an economy that needs third-class cars? Because it feels like this opportunity that the government sees that they keep talking about, is it a real opportunity?
You see, again, it revolves around our choice of aircraft.
Okay.
The type of aircraft that we're using. Because remember, KQ was very heavily, initially it was Airbus. Then when we went Boeing, they were very heavy on 737,
yes, they were.
767 and 777.
777. All
of a sudden now, we have a lot of Embraer. With due respect to Embraer, I don't think it serves us very well. It's a short haul plane, and the load factor is not as good as you'd find a 73 or 76 or 777. Why that was decided is beyond me, and I don't want to discuss it here.
So this is now where we're at.
But now that we are going to this, even that, the choice of crafts that will be within the set has to be discussed based on what we want to do. And cargo planes has to form a substantial part of that fleet, because as I'm saying now, we are looking at this purely as an economic asset, that we want to drive our flowers to where they're supposed to. We don't sometimes our flowers rot here because we do not have enough capacity or enough planes from even other private to take them where we want. We want to be in control. We want to be in a situation whereby people only take abroad what we can't take, but we are the ones who take up the majority of it. So that is number. And then number three, the government has a foreign policy. We have a diplomatic policy which we have to drive. So that means we have to fly to certain areas that serve the interests of government and Kenyans as a whole. Notwithstanding whether those routes are making money, but globally all the routes will make us money. Because as I'm telling you, the moment we shift our attention that this is an economic asset that is going to serve Kenyans, then in effect, all Kenyans become shareholders, stakeholders now. Because every person, the person who's selling avocado becomes a stakeholder. The person who wants to fly to a country that Kenya has relations with, but nobody flies there. We want to go there. So in that effect, but also the shareholder, being the government, the treasury for that matter, will still get money. Because once these are streamlined, because even if you look at KQ, two things are glare. Despite their negative capital, despite their losses, their top line was still growing. That's number one. Number two, they were still generating cash. That to me tells me, without a single, I've not looked at their books because I've not been intimate with them, that these are just purely operational issues.
Actually, it's a purchase of the planes.
Yes.
Because they had a very ambitious plan.
And they were buying them, and I'm not sure there was competitive that should be. And anyway, most of it was leased. Some of by. I'm telling you that fleet composition, fleet acquisition, and whether we want to have them on lease or whether we want to have them on our balance sheet. All those are discussions that have to be held and have to be driven by the fact that we now want to get it right once and for all.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But I like the context that you're bringing out. Now, this is more of an economic asset and a strategic asset.
Yes.
Before we look at the pros and cons of looking at it in that way, we have a situation where banks had put money in Kenya Airways. We have a situation where you and I had put money because our pension funds are the ones that were holding this money, either directly through Treasury or through the asset managers. And we have a stock that started off, I mean, it hit a high of 100 and a couple of shillings over 100, and then it dropped to 0.8.
Yes.
It gets to 0.8, rallies up 40%, a few shillings, and then all of a sudden it starts the process of nationalization. On the flip side, the government does want to inject money, but it's also injecting public funds. So it's your money and my money. So the question is, why are we getting into a space where our monies are being eroded or the value is being eroded, and who are we supposed to hold accountable? Because it feels like it's money that keeps chasing bad money, that keeps chasing bad money. Where does it stop, and what happens to the people who've been in the stock before?
I think we are between a rock and a hard place.
Okay.
We only have two options. We can do nothing. If we do nothing, Kiki goes to the dogs.
Would that be such a bad thing?
It would be a horrible thing.
Okay.
Yeah, because if today we do not have a national airline, I think we are bad, it will be worse.
It will be worse.
Yes.
Okay.
So the only option that is left is to rescue it. So sometimes you have to put money, and I think this particular money may not. Previously, we've thrown good money after bad. But I think this time, the way we seem to be doing it, we seem to be thinking properly about it. I think we may be throwing good money after our money.
Okay.
And the good thing is you brought out a topic of how do we get out, especially the banks. The banks have a big chunk.
Yes, they do.
Now, and remembering the model of banks is that they operate on short-term liabilities, then they have to be given short-term assets. So I don't see them, they're not going to be given cash, but they may be given T-bills.
Okay.
T-bills are 90 days, so it's a near cash asset. Now, yes, whichever we do it, whether I give them cash or give them asset, it still builds up on our debt.
Okay.
Yeah, so there is no other way out of it.
So this is what needs to be done.
This is what it is, but you see, the good thing is, the question is, what we should think about more is it good debt? Is this money going to be spent properly? So that's why, and that's why this time I think we've decided to legislate the structure properly.
Okay.
And the vehicle, you can see we're trying to put a vehicle whereby we're putting in those companies that we think form synergies. And by putting them together, we're basically cutting out their common fixed costs.
Okay.
Yeah, just trying to rationalize them and make them efficient.
Okay. And I like that way of thinking, and perhaps I'll broaden it and ask, if this is the way the government is looking at the aviation sector, then do we expect to see a similar mindset in terms of clustering sectors and getting them out of the private space and nationalizing them?
You remember, in 2013, there's presidential task force on the merger of parastatal state corporations, if you like. And that document, and the president's mind has not changed, because the president's mind is changed when they issue something different from what they said. Okay. So for as long as that is still live, so it means his mind is still there. Okay. Going by the documents. So that process is ongoing. I may not be privy to it, but that process is ongoing. So as time goes by, we will see, because it was one of the best ways to do it, because it had hit a point where we were splitting our hairs too much. You see, like, give you an example. You see, initially when we started, we only had Kenya Power. Out of Kenya Power came Kensha, Kentraco, GDC, Kenya Power, and I think there's one more. So you see, whereas there's thinking behind them, I'm not in any way belittling those organizations. I'm saying it did not hold for all the ones that were done in other sectors. So if you read that, it's a massive document, and it's a public document. Okay. That you'll see that the thing that was being put about clustering this sector and this sector, like what they did in agriculture, when they created the AFA. AFA put together almost 40 by creating directorates, we had a parastatal for each commodity.
Yes, we did.
You see, now, you see, when you have a parastatal for, and then we almost went the animal way. We want to have something for fish, for a cow, for chicken. I think we were losing it. So that's why you see the alpha. But now again, they're saying the alpha is too big. They may want to split it.
Okay.
So you see, and it's normal. You must be dynamic in your thinking. But sometimes it's also good to have strategic thinking, that even if you're doing your thinking, let it at least be long-term thinking. So that even if you're going to change, you'll not change every other time. You'll stay for a while with something, then you can review it in 5 years going forward.
So
but alpha has not been there for long, but already I can see the current CS is already thinking about dividing it, because maybe they made it too big, you see? Because the thinking then was that they are in agriculture, let's put them in one house, let's have directorates. But sometimes we miss the point that sometimes the sum of the individuals may not be equal to the sum of the total.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes it may be more, sometimes it may be less. So in this case, the verdict is out there. But to answer your question, I think by the time we are done, we'll have fewer parastatals than we have now.
What has happened to Kenya Airways, could this happen to Kenya Power?
You never know. It could. Because, see, what we are all looking at is, could we do this more efficiently, by having less of people? Because, see, we are looking also at body count. We're looking at the multiplicity of, because you see, when you have a parastatal comes with its own system. It has to have its board, it has management, it has to have its offices, it has to have its vehicles. So you're saying if these two are in the same place, having one CEO, then have directorates, would it work? If it works, then it costs us less, then it becomes more efficient. Yes. But if by putting them together, the mandate becomes too mundane, and then we miss. Because, see, at the end of the day, it's about having an organization that can deliver a mandate.
Okay.
Yeah. If that mandate cannot be delivered by putting them together, then don't do it.
All
but if you can deliver it efficiently by putting them together, by all means do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then let me take a different angle, because you are an economist, and I want to look at it from a national strategic standpoint.
Yeah.
We have the Nairobi Securities Exchange, which is supposed to be a way of mobilizing savings and taking these savings and allowing companies to access these funds.
Yes, yes.
I think over the last decade, we've had a successful listing of Safaricom.
Yes.
But over and above that, we've had shareholders and pension funds lose money through the likes of Athi River Mining. We've had them lose money now through the likes of Kenya Airways. And there are also others that have also lost considerable value. They're still listed. They've just not had to go through the delisting process. Does the NSC then, is it even relevant? Should we mobilize capital, allocate it for it to be misappropriated, and then the pension funds are left wanting? What does that mean for national savings?
I think we spoke about it here. NSC as a platform, I think it should stay, because I think that model worldwide has shown that it's, first of all, it's a good pulse for the economy, and again, it's an alternative for investment and mobilization of resources. But if you look at the Kenyan one, for example, we've had that problem of the concentration risk. And that risk is now coming home, where we have five or six counters that call the shots. So, and instead of us expanding it, I think we've been shrinking it. So, and don't forget, the five also have a finite capacity of how much investment they can take in.
Exactly.
Because there's so much pressure on those ones, because everybody wants to buy it, everybody wants to sell it. So the solution is a mid to long-term solution. In the short term, I think there's very little we can do. I think we can only hope and pray in the short term that these five stay, because if anything happens to any of these five, the systemic shocks, would be devastating.
Okay.
Because the ones that have gone bust have been the smaller ones, but you can see they still have effects, because if your pension is that one, you go bust.
But let me just interject. You see, the ones that have gone bust now are the smaller ones.
Yes.
But a while back, they were the larger ones. There was a time KQ was part of the big five.
It was, but it since left that list a long time ago.
Yes.
So it's a small one now. But
so the question is, could this big five
Yes.
end up following a KQ trajectory?
Everything is possible. I mean, you remember even Safaricom at some point was also trading below a shilling.
Yes.
At some point.
No, it was at 2 shillings.
Yes, they went at
from 5 and then it turned to 2.
And then now they took off. And also, with the future, I think once the effects of the pandemic start slowing down, we could see a new investor, a new type of investor, who may actually change this matrix completely, may come in and now see value in these so-called smaller ones,
okay,
and pump in more capital in the smaller ones, and stay away from these bigger ones. So everything is possible, but again, we still the solution is in the diversification.
Okay.
Because if you had a counter that had 80 counters, it doesn't matter who's going down. The stock exchange, the securities exchange is
it's
stable.
okay.
But now, my good friend Jeff prays every day for those 5.
Yes.
Because if any of them goes bad,
if anything goes wrong, then
yeah.
you're done. Okay. So again, looking at just all of what's happening from a strategic standpoint.
Yeah.
So Kenya Airways is out. So we could spend another hour or 2 discussing it. It's really becoming out of our purview.
It is.
And it would really be a waste of time, because it's done. Whatever is done, you're saying it's in a rock and a hard place, and of course there will be strategic proposals on how they need to run it,
yeah,
to ensure that possibly that the public funds that are deployed there yield a return. But when you look at it as an economic asset, that's a very long term. That's 20, 30 years.
You see, when we talk about an economic return, it just takes care of Kenya.
Exactly.
Because all of us are mortal and we'll all exit at some point.
Okay.
But those ones will be left to continue.
Those ones will be left to continue.
Yeah.
So then now, if you're investing in this country, there's some risks that I see from some decisions that come out of Kenya Airways. Firstly, there's the increased government interference, so to speak, because you're going this way, then all of a sudden a decision is made.
Yes.
So we have seen in the last 30 days, we've seen the decision done by Kenya Airways. I think the market was expecting that the government of Kenya would do an equity injection into the company, not a delisting and creating a new company.
Yeah.
That's granted. Then we've also seen a decision taken out on betting, where one day the companies were being taxed, and then the next day they were not being taxed. When you look at regulatory risk and the risk of decisions being made by the political class, how does this then define your investment strategy in this country if you're not affiliated with the political class?
For foreign investment to come here, or for even local investment, you need certainty within the regulatory environment. And by certainty, I mean 2 things. One, that you can determine that in this sector there are X amount of things to be paid, and they cost Y. But more importantly, that those numbers will not change at a whim. Now, I'm laying a foundation to say that when we keep putting you give a waiver on something, then you take it back. Like you've seen the last budget.
Yes.
We took back a lot of waivers very silently.
Exactly.
So there are investors who will, like a good example is the way the KPLC want to invoke the force majeure. You see, for a long time the PPA document has always been gold, but that alone has sent shockwaves in the sector, not in the investment sector, outside this country.
Yes.
People who come to it, because that kind of investment is very heavy. I mean, when you're doing power generation, a megawatt will cost you anything between $1 million and $2 million per megawatt.
And it's a long-term investment.
20 years.
Very long-term. That's
PPAs,
20-year
PPAs,
concession.
So in that 20 year, I would want to know, these are the okay, with the PPA, everything is cast in stone. But now they are saying, if we invoke force majeure into this thing, we can actually change those metrics.
Yes.
Now, if those metrics can be changed, then that document does not mean anything.
Exactly.
And when that document doesn't mean anything, nobody will put their money. And the people with that kind of money don't play games. They put their money where they know they'll get it back, and get it back in the return. And that return, they can determine it with some level of degree of certainty upfront.
Okay.
So to answer your question, we will need to stabilize especially our tax regime. So that we say, let's put it whatever we want to put it at, but let it have some level of certainty, and some level of stability, and some level of sustainability.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me put another spanner in the works
Yes.
here, and I'm really enjoying this conversation. I think at times perhaps we have, when you and I are looking at Kenya,
Yes.
we're all inward looking.
Yes, we
so
are.
we're just saying this is not what we saw last year, it was better, etc. But when you talk about your foreign investors, when they're looking at Kenya, they're saying, okay, in Africa there's Kenya, there's Nigeria and sub-Saharan Africa. If you broaden it into the entire continent, there's South Africa, there's Egypt. And if you're looking for a return, you're saying, what return am I getting here, and what's the risk of the currency?
Yes.
So interestingly, last week I was following the T-bill auction in Nigeria.
Yes.
And the rates,
I saw that.
you know, the subscription levels are, I think the rates in Nigeria are about 3% for 1 year paper. I think for Kenya today, we are closer to 7%.
Yes, around there.
So if I'm a foreign investor, I'm also looking and trying to see what is the makeup of the economy? Where am I going to get a return? And in as much as we might keep saying that Kenya is not doing well, if you compare it, it's actually the best of a bad basket.
True.
And it could be that maybe we're in the space where the people who need the capital are saying, you know what, we're still going to give you a return. We just want to give you a higher return because there are no other options that are giving you a return. And so this is what we're bringing to the table. Could it be that now the government has a much higher bargaining power in terms of the return that it gives investors, whether local or foreign, largely because it's a better pick out of a bad basket?
In fact, if you turn that round, then it would mean maybe we are giving too much premium. If Nigeria is at 3 and we're at 7, we also need to think about, because remember, Kenya at some point we really pushed our T-bill rate almost 1% during Muraria time.
Yes.
So what am I saying? I'm saying we also need to keep pushing this rate down.
Okay.
To manage two things. One, that it still remains attractive to that guy who's looking at Africa as one port and looking at Nigeria is at 3, what is South Africa at, what is Kenya, and then come to Kenya, that we still keep that guy. But also not push the cost of capital here too high.
Okay.
So 7 could go lower. So that means even if we were at 5, we will still beat Nigeria.
Okay.
But we have shaved off 2%. But now again I'm seeing MPC has become cautious.
Very.
But I don't want a cautious MPC. I want an aggressive MP, because you see, intervention organs are not supposed to be mild. That's why they're intervention. You see, a surgeon cannot treat you before they cut you up. So this one, if you're an interventionist, you have to go in. For the MPC, I think we need to be very, very deliberate about what we want to do.
Yes.
And and if you listen to government talks about going down, but the MPC is not following. The other day they left it at where it was.
They left it as is.
I think it could still go down.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think also it is to do with the pandemic.
So there could be a sense that possibly it goes down. And I like the way you're saying that perhaps people have realized that we've been giving the market a premium return on investments, and we don't need to.
We don't need to.
Because actually when you look at, I was looking at a report earlier today that was published by Genghis, and they're saying that Kenya was the second worst performer over the last 6 months in Africa in terms of the Nairobi Securities Exchange. And it's down 17%. And when I look at the conversation that we're having, then it could be that even investors are saying, okay, it looks like the premium we've been getting on investment returns in Kenya could be correcting. So in as much as other sectors are correcting, then there could be a natural correction on the securities exchange as well, which could mean that the prices we are seeing today might not be sustainable in a year or 2 years.
But also remember, you see, there is that is the capital markets.
Yes.
And then now there's the money market, the one we're talking about here. You see, sometimes those two markets work against each other. If I'm talking about the MPC, and if somebody doesn't look at them together, if we make the money market too premium, it starts affecting the stock exchange. And you'll actually literally see people cashing in their shares to put money in T-bills, literally.
Yes.
Somebody sitting in a bank will tell you that's how money is flowing. So sometimes also as a policymaker, you want to decide what you want. Like now, we need to spruce up the stock exchange, the securities exchange. Sorry. And one way of doing it is depressing the money market. If we push the money market to a certain threshold, people will push their money back up, because people are looking for it. It's a yield game, and you see, with the kind of depressed prices we have at the securities exchange, the only way is up. So somebody will be like, rather than me do a bond at a depressed rate, let me take my chances with the stock exchange because it can get worse.
Yes.
You see?
Yes.
So and then they just, and again, that's where diversification comes in. If you have a good basket of counters, then you can spread your risk well. But here you are stuck with the 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's either you buy the 5 today,
yes,
or you do
or you do the money market. Okay, for now the money market works, but I don't see it staying the way it is.
Or you do the money market?
Yeah, because the money market, the premium I'm talking about, I'm sure I'm not the only one who has seen it.
Yes.
And somebody somewhere who has more power than me will push it down.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I think this conversation it's come to a very interesting culmination. Take it or leave it.
Yes.
Keep your ear out in terms of being updated on government decisions, because unless you're part of the political elite, you will not necessarily have a heads up, but you're always able to tell there's something happening, there's something that's cooking underneath.
Yes.
And
I think, yes, the political class will always behave how political class are. I mean, this is not unique to Kenya, it's everywhere. But if you look at any legislation process, there's that window of public participation.
okay.
And that's where, if you have something to say, you say it. And if you go to those sessions in Parliament, at the committee level, those parliamentarians really listen. I've been to several of them, and I've seen bills changed, because they appreciate that they do not know it all.
Yes.
And anyway, don't forget, they're not the authors of those documents. Those documents are authored by the AG. So because what they are clear about is the object of the law. You know, in any bill, there's that object, and we must remain fidel to that object. What is the object of this? Like the object of the aviation bill? What is it? What do you want to achieve? And is there any other way of achieving it other than the one we're using?
Yes.
And if you can show them, they have no problem.
Yes.
If it will cost us less, if it will bring less pain, they'll listen to it. But again, it also helps when sometimes it's not good to fight a current. Sometimes, as they say, when the wind changes, you adjust your sail. So sometimes if we see the political classes moving in certain directions, they have, even in economics, it appreciates the fact that politics allocates resources.
That's true.
That's a fact.
That's true.
You know, and there's no equation that can show you that, but we all know it. We can do our econometrics all we want, but at the end of the day, political class decide.
Do you know how I've adjusted my sail in this regard?
What?
So I've just been looking at, there's the story when our president, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, sent flowers to United Kingdom.
Yes, yes.
Then after that, the key engagement was we were selected into the UN Security Council.
Yes.
And after that, the end of last week, there was a one-on-one call with our president and the Prime Minister of UK.
Yes.
And, you know, that tells me sort of what's happening. So you have to pay attention to the geopolitics.
You have to.
And I think some of the opportunities that I'm reading through, which may or may not be on the NSC, if for one, betting has, the taxes have been removed, it's important to remember that Safaricom was a key facilitator for the funds, the transfer of payments through betting, and it had a material, betting had an interesting amount contribution to M-Pesa. So that's a positive that I read through that. And then I also read a positive for the horticulture sector, again through this economic asset of Kenya Airways and the leads that are being created and the channels that are opening up in UK. So I think that's a sale that I'm certainly adjusting to see. As a public participant, I can engage in Safaricom, or I can look for value add in the horticulture and see how to piggy up on that.
Yeah, I in my life, I've come to appreciate that. You see, the government is structured in a certain way.
Yes.
Where the president has certain powers. And those powers are given to him by us. So we cannot again start to question those powers, because we're the ones who give them those powers. So and it is at his discretion to do what he must do. Because he's the one we'll blame if it doesn't go right.
Yes.
So it is better to adjust to that reality and still get what we want to get.
Yes.
You see, than try to fight it.
Yes.
Because sometimes some of these fights are not necessary, with due respect. Because like now what they're trying to do with KQ, of course people have different opinions. But what is the alternative? Me, I would want to hear somebody tell me what the alternative is. Nobody has come up with it. They'll throw stones at that.
Yes.
But short of that, people say, of course, the people will say, no, let it die off. Fine. Financial sense, yes, is that.
You can't be in the UN Security Council without a national carrier.
Yes, it's something new. Financially, the shareholders can die with the asset. But economically for Kenya, we cannot live without a look at how the agony countries are going through right now to put up a national airline.
Exactly.
And some of these countries are countries that had done away with it and now are seeing
That it's a strategic
that even when you go for those big international airline meetings, if you don't have an airline, you have no seat. You see, and now Kenya has become a big boy. I've been at the UN Council. So we do require, if nothing else, for our foreign policy, for our trade, for everything, for every Kenyan, we require that infrastructure. But I'm not saying that it's a carte blanche to run it inefficiently. We can all win. But we must start from a point that we must live with some losses, which are financial, as we achieve our economic, and as when the economic gets right, then our financial gets sorted.
Okay,
yeah.
Fantastic. That was a very interesting conversation. I wish we could go on. Perhaps you can leave us with your parting shots as we come to the end of the show.
I think my parting shot would be around COVID, and the thing is, I think as gloomy as it looks, I think it has done one thing for all of us. It has put us on the starting line. So it's how well you prepare yourself, how well you get ready, because the starting gun is about to be fired, and we all start again.
We all start
together.
again.
So don't blame anyone that you didn't put on your running shoes, you didn't put on your tracksuit. The gun is about to go off.
I can see you already,
yes,
Abraham.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time. That was Mr. Abraham Kamau, the Chief Executive Officer of Miradi. We've had an interesting conversation. We were really trying to understand what's happening in Kenya Airways. But this conversation took us into different areas in trying to understand, is there still an investment case for Kenya? And we've come to this culmination. Yes, there is. Instead of actually going back and forth and trying to figure out what's happening, the thing that I've had from Abraham, adjust your sails, because the wind has certainly changed. It's either you're going to keep investing in the government bonds, which we've seen the 1 year hit almost a low of 7% for a 1 year paper, or are you going to look for opportunities on the Nairobi Securities Exchange? The big 5 other ones that are eminent, and that's Safaricom, the top tier banks, as well as EABL and BAT. Is there an opportunity for you to look at those? That's a conversation that we will continue to have here. And in closing, COVID is here. It's now moved from a pandemic to an endemic. It's something that's going to be with us for a longer time. Wash your hands, sanitize, certainly social distance. Keep your health. It's important for you to be here a year from today, 20 years from today, as many years as you possibly can be. But over and above that, Abraham has left us with a question. Do you have your running shoes on? Are you ready when the gun sets off? I wish you all the best for the day ahead, and I await to hear your engagements, your comments, your feedback. That SMS line is 20146. Alternatively, you can reach out to us via social media. That's either Metropole TV Kenya, or you can directly message me at Mbithe Mwema. Thank you for your time. See you tomorrow, same time. Good day.